On this vote, the ayes are 54, the nays are 45. The nomination of Neil M. Gorsuch of Colorado to be an Associate Justice of the Supreme Court of the United States is confirmed.
The Supreme Court seat stolen from President Obama with 14 months left in his term was awarded to Donald Trump's nominee, Neil Gorsuch, on Friday, after Mitch McConnell and Senate Republicans responded to the Democrats' filibuster by invoking the so-called nuclear option. Gorsuch will be sworn in on Monday. And joining me now, Sherilyn Ifill, President and Director Co-Counsel of the NAACP Legal Defense Fund, which opposed Gorsuch's confirmation, David Frum, Senior Editor for The Atlantic, and Jason Johnson, Politics Editor at TheRoot.com. And Sherilyn, I'm going to come to you first. Big picture, what does it mean that the Republicans chose to fill the Supreme Court seat in this way?
Well, I think obviously this is incredibly disruptive of what has already been a dysfunctional Congress. What happened to Judge Garland, who was President Obama's nominee to fill the seat last year, is unprecedented and shocking, and I think has really forever shifted politics in the United States Senate. But it also has consequences for all of us all over this country, because it took the Supreme Court that was headed in one direction and reversed course and brought it back to another direction, and that is the direction it was in when Justice Scalia sat on the court. But I would argue, given Judge Gorsuch's record in several key areas, we are likely looking at a court that may, in some areas, be even more conservative than Justice Scalia. And what that means for America is that changes the course of American history. That changes the course of legal interpretation in this country. That changes the interpretation of rights, and it changes civil rights from our perspective. So this is not a small thing. This is a large and seismic shift in the future of this country, not only as a matter of tradition in the United States Senate, but as a matter of the direction of the United States Supreme Court, and therefore the direction of law and legal rights in this country. And
David, you know, Mitch McConnell has been pretty transparent that he didn't care how this looked. He was going to do this regardless. He was going to put Gorsuch on the court one way or another. And I wonder how Republicans sit with this idea that Mitch McConnell essentially established the principle that only a Republican president is allowed to make a Supreme Court nominee. They were also threatening to never seat a nominee if Hillary Clinton became president. I mean, how does the party live with that being their idea?
I think you need some perspective on this. Merrick Garland was never going to be on the Supreme Court, even had he had the hearings, even had the vote. He would have been defeated. He would have been voted down. That
you
seat
don't know
was not
that. How do you know that?
Because I can count, and I can count the number of Republicans there were in the last Congress. It was not going to happen that Republicans were going to break ranks and confirm him, any more than Barack Obama, when he was a senator, broke ranks to vote in favor of Samuel Alito. These nominations are increasingly partisan fights, and that's what it would have turned into. And the seat wasn't President Obama's to bestow; it was President Obama's to nominate.
But wait, hold on a second. So, just to back up for just 1 second, because first of all, the idea that President Obama essentially can take just the right as a president to nominate. He didn't get even meetings, Garland. I don't know how you can argue that because you project that had Hillary Clinton won, for instance, you don't know what would have happened with the Senate. Nobody knows. But the idea that simply because your whip count says he wouldn't have made it, that it doesn't matter that he never got even meetings, I think is actually pretty outrageous. It affirms what Mitch McConnell has been arguing, which I think most Americans think is completely outrageous and unfair.
Here's the message I'm bringing to you, and I think it's something that's important for viewers of this show especially to contemplate. If you're going to sustain what I regard as the true belief that Donald Trump is an unusual, an exceptional, a deviant, an abnormal president, then you have to divide how you feel about him from the things that would have happened if, say, Marco Rubio were president right now, or Jeb Bush, from the things that are unique to Donald Trump. If Jeb Bush had won the presidency in the same way, having lost the popular vote but winning the Electoral College, he would have nominated Neil Gorsuch, and with a Republican majority in the Senate, Neil Gorsuch would have been confirmed. History would have played out exactly the same way. There's nothing abnormal about what you are seeing here in the way that other things you are seeing, the way the National Security Council works, the other things that President Trump is doing, those are abnormal. If you're going to defend at a moment of pressure the American system from a unique danger, you have to not get so worked up about things that are the ordinary stuff of politics.
Jason?
Yeah,
Do you think
completely
this is just
disagree.
ordinary? I suspected you might. Your thoughts?
No, none of this. And I think, Joy, the key thing here is, we can't excuse the horrible behavior, the anti-democratic, the anti-American behavior of the Republican Party. But I think the larger lesson here is this. It is a lesson to the Democratic Party to go back to their civics lessons and read the rules and recognize who it is they're competing against. I wrote about this last year in The Root about how President Obama flinched. He could have appointed someone to the Supreme Court. Congress was in full recess. That person would have stayed in that position at least until the end of the year. And he didn't because he was more focused on norms than winning. The Democrats have to recognize the Republicans don't care about polls. They don't care about precedent. They don't care about looking good. They want to win. And if you want to win, that's how you have to operate in this current Congress. And that's the only way that you'll be able to resist Donald Trump.
Yeah. If you have thoughts on it, I want to let you say them as well, Sherilyn. But I want to make sure that we also talk about the other thing that Republicans wanted to win by getting the White House. They got control of the Department of Justice. And there are consequences to that, too, just like there were consequences for the Supreme Court. One of which is that Jefferson Sessions, the Attorney General, would like to review all consent decrees. He has essentially said it's not the responsibility of the federal government to manage non-federal law enforcement agencies. That is the principle he set forth. The one sort of good piece of news for if you care about police reform is that a federal judge has said, well, sorry, you have to implement the Baltimore consent decree at least anyway. And I know that the LDF, the NAACP Legal Defense Fund, did get involved to push that forward. Your thoughts on this other reality that has resulted from Trump's election?
Well, putting aside the Supreme Court for a moment, which is no small thing, the Attorney General's position is really quite shocking. This is the Chief Law Enforcement Officer of the United States. There is a statute that was enacted for the purpose of giving the Department of Justice the right to investigate and prosecute local police departments for law enforcement misconduct. In fact, it's called the Law Enforcement Misconduct Statute. It is 42 U.S.C. 14141. That is the statute that authorized the Department of Justice to investigate the Baltimore City Police Department, for example, and to enter into a consent decree with that police department to transform and to reform unconstitutional policing practices. So Jeff Sessions' view about how local law enforcement should proceed and his view about the morale of police departments and so forth is quite apart from what his statutory obligation is under that statute to prosecute law officer and law enforcement misconduct. And what he tried to do in this case is he tried to scuttle a consent decree that had already been submitted to the federal court. And James Bredar, the federal district court judge in Baltimore, said, you simply don't get to do that. The Department of Justice negotiated this consent decree with the city of Baltimore over the course of months, entered that consent decree, and now Jeff Sessions says that the president's priorities are illegal immigration, drug trafficking, and violent crime. Those may all be very interesting priorities, but those are not the priorities that are part of the Law Enforcement Misconduct Statute. The Law Enforcement Misconduct Statute is focused on unconstitutional policing, and that's the statute that governs the contours of the consent decree. Unfortunately, the federal district judge was not having it. We have sought to intervene in the case. Attorney General Sessions has made it clear he has no intentions of rigorously prosecuting the case and ensuring that the provisions of the consent decree are complied with by the city. We believe it's important to ensure that there is a party in the case that's prepared to do that. The residents of the city of Baltimore have the right to be free of unconstitutional policing,
right.
And so we're seeking to intervene in the case.
I wish we had more time. I feel like I'm going to just say that over and over and over again before this 2 hours is up. Sherilyn Ifill, thank you so much. Jason Johnson and David Frum, thank you all for being here.